In the heart of a quiet village in West Africa, as the sun slowly rises and bathes the land in golden light, a gentle wind stirs the dust of the narrow red earth paths. Life is waking up. Roosters crow, women sweep their yards, and the first sounds of morning fill the air. But among this daily routine, a little girl sits quietly and alone. Her name is Aminata, and she is only 8 years old. Details: slim, dark-skinned girl with expressive brown eyes, short tightly coiled hair, wearing a faded yellow dress with a tear on the left shoulder and no shoes. Her face is a mix of innocence and resilience. Every morning, Aminata walks to the same wooden bench near the village market. Not to sell or to play, but to learn. She carries with her a single torn notebook and a half-broken pencil, treasures she guards like gold. She found them in a pile of discarded trash 2 months ago, and since then, they've become her entire world. She watches the other children pass by on their way to school. They wear blue uniforms, hold shiny backpacks, and walk in groups, laughing and chatting. Aminata doesn't speak to them. She simply watches, wide-eyed, quiet, and curious. Inside her, a fire burns. A hunger, not for food, though she often goes hungry, but for knowledge. For books. For a chance. The school is just 300 meters from where she sits. Its walls are made of cracked bricks, its roof of rusty tin sheets. But to Aminata, it looks like a palace. A place of magic. Every word she's ever heard from a book, every story she's dreamed of, all seem to live behind those walls. She tried once, just once, to enter. The memory haunts her. That day, she approached the school gate, barefoot, her heart pounding with hope. She had rehearsed her words 100 times. But before she could speak, the teacher at the gate, a tall man with tired eyes, saw her torn clothes and dirty feet. Without even asking her name, he frowned and said, "This is not a place for beggars. Go back to where you came from." Aminata didn't cry. She only nodded, stepped back slowly, and turned away. Her heart broke silently. But her will? It didn't. Now, each day, she writes on her knees in the dust. She copies letters she sees on old posters. She sounds out words she hears people say. The market women have come to know her. Sometimes, they leave bits of paper near her bench, with words written on them. It's their quiet way of helping. And there she stays, day after day. Under the sun, under the rain. Dreaming, learning, believing, that one day, she will sit inside that school, not as a visitor, but as a student. Aminata doesn't know it yet, but her story is only beginning. The years passed, and Aminata, the little girl who once wrote in the dust, continued to learn in silence. She was now 12 years old. She had become a familiar sight in the village. Every day, under the same mango tree near the market, she read discarded newspapers, scribbled in old notebooks donated by sympathetic women, and recited everything she remembered out loud like poems to herself. But one morning, something changed. A woman named Madame Diarra arrived in the village. Details: tall, elegant dark-skinned woman in her late 40s, wearing a royal blue African wrapper with golden embroidery, a matching head wrap, gold-rimmed glasses, and soft eyes. Her posture is confident but warm. Madame Diarra was a teacher from the city, returning to her home village to visit her sick mother. She noticed Aminata immediately, the way the young girl sat under the tree, eyes scanning a crumpled newspaper, lips moving as she tried to understand each sentence. There was something striking about her, something fierce and gentle all at once. Later that day, Madame Diarra approached Aminata gently. "Hello, little one," she said softly. Aminata, startled, looked up and then quickly looked away. She wasn't used to adults speaking to her kindly. But Madame Diarra knelt beside her. "What are you reading?" she asked. Aminata hesitated, then replied in a small voice, "An article about elections. I don't understand some words." That one sentence changed everything. Madame Diarra sat with Aminata for an hour, explaining the words, asking questions, and listening to Aminata's thoughts. She was stunned by the girl's intelligence. Raw, unshaped, but brilliant. The next day, Madame Diarra returned. And the next. For a whole week, she taught Aminata by the tree, with chalk on stones, and words drawn in the dust. The market women watched in silence, their hearts swelling with hope. At the end of the week, Madame Diarra made a decision. She would sponsor Aminata to attend the city school. She couldn't change the past, but she could change this girl's future. She spoke to the village elders. She spoke to Aminata's grandmother, Mammy Kumba. Details: short, wrinkled dark-skinned woman in her 70s, with silver-gray short hair, wearing a faded brown wrapper and carrying a wooden walking stick. Her eyes are tired but kind. Tears filled Mamikumba's eyes when she heard the news. She has always been different, she said. Even when she had nothing, she always believed she could become something. That evening, Aminata sat in her small clay home, her notebook open, a candle flickering beside her. For the first time, her name would be on a real school list. She would leave the village, but carry its spirit in her heart. A spark had met a flame, and together, they would light the future. The day of departure arrived. The village awoke with excitement and pride. For many, it was the first time someone so young, so poor, had been given such a chance. The sun rose gently over the thatched roofs, bathing the earth in a warm orange glow. Aminata, the once dusty girl with dreams too big for the streets, stood before her home with trembling hands. Beside her stood her grandmother, Mamikumba, holding a wooden cane and smiling through tears. Villagers gathered around, some whispering blessings, others offering food for the road. Children waved shyly. Mothers looked at Aminata with a blend of awe and inspiration. She was leaving, but she was taking all their dreams with her. Then came the sound of the engine. A blue pickup truck slowly pulled up. Dust swirled behind it. Inside sat Madame Diarra, the woman who had seen more than a child under a tree. She had seen a flame. She stepped out and approached Aminata and Mamikumba, embracing them both. "Are you ready, my dear?" she asked. Aminata nodded, though her voice trembled. "Yes, I think I am." With gentle hands, Madame Diarra helped her into the front seat. As the truck began to move, Aminata looked back. The village faded slowly behind her, but the memory remained etched in her heart, every face, every smile, every prayer. The road to the city was long and winding. Fields stretched wide, dotted with goats and farmers waving from afar. Aminata stared out the window, her mind filled with questions. Would she fit in? Would she be able to keep up? Would they laugh at her worn-out shoes? Madame Diarra, sensing her unease, placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You have a gift," she said. "Your past is not your limit. It's your power." For the first time in days, Aminata smiled. When they arrived at the city, Aminata's eyes widened. The buildings, the cars, the noise, everything was loud and fast. But she didn't flinch. She clutched her little cloth bag tightly and followed Madame Diarra into her home, where she would live and prepare before starting school. That night, Aminata sat on a real bed, in a real room, with a lamp glowing beside her. She opened her notebook and wrote, "I am no longer just a girl from the village. I am a student. And one day, I will teach others like me." The city was not kind at first. It was fast, loud, and filled with children who had never known what it was like to be hungry under a tree. When Aminata walked into the gates of her new school, all heads turned. Whispers followed her like shadows. "She's the charity girl," some said. Others laughed at her accent, at her shoes, at the way she sat in class, straight, alert, too eager. But Aminata remembered her grandmother's voice, whispering, "Keep learning. You are building your wings." Her first week was a storm. In class, she raised her hand often, but her voice trembled. Her answers, though correct, were met with giggles. She never fought back. She watched. She learned. She adapted. One day, in literature class, the teacher asked, "Who can recite the poem from memory?" Nobody moved. Then slowly, Aminata stood up. Her voice, still soft, began to recite, each line spoken with grace and perfect rhythm. The class fell silent. When she finished, the teacher clapped. "Well done, Aminata." For the first time, the room didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a step forward. Back at home, Madame Diarra noticed the change. "You're holding your head higher," she said. "I'm learning to walk like I belong," Aminata replied. As the months passed, Aminata stopped trying to hide her background. She spoke in debates about the struggles of rural education. She shared stories of children who studied by moonlight, who had to work before reading. Her honesty struck something in her classmates. Some began to respect her. Others began to follow her lead. By the end of the school year, she had earned the highest scores in her class. Not because she was smarter, but because she worked harder. Because her hunger wasn't just for food, it was for change. She began writing essays about the flaws in the education system, about how the poorest were being left behind. One of her essays was published in a national youth journal. Another won a citywide award. But the moment that changed everything was a televised student forum. When the host pointed to her and asked, "What would you change about education?" she said without hesitation, "I would build schools where the street ends." I would train teachers who see talent in every child, even those who come barefoot." Her words echoed across the country. People didn't just see a poor girl who made it to the city. They saw a leader in the making. And Aminata, once mocked for her accent and shoes, became a voice no one could ignore. Years had passed since that fateful day when Aminata first stood up in front of her classmates. She had proven herself time and again, first as a student, then as a passionate advocate for reform. Now, in the heart of the nation's capital, the once timid girl had transformed into a force that no one could ignore. At just 32 years old, Aminata had been appointed as the Minister of Education, a position she had never imagined but had fought hard for. Her appointment was symbolic, a victory for the poor, for the rural child, for every underprivileged person who had been told they didn't belong in the halls of power. As she walked into her office on the first day, her heart raced, but her head was clear. She had already faced the hardest battles, and now she was ready to fight for an entire generation. Her first major project was a nationwide school reform initiative. Aminata knew that every child, no matter their background, deserved the opportunity to dream big. She had spent years visiting rural schools, listening to the struggles of teachers, parents, and students. And now, it was time to bring those voices into the heart of government. Aminata was determined to create a system that recognized the value of every child, no matter how small their village or how worn their shoes. The reforms began with a simple but revolutionary idea: free education for every child. Aminata knew that the costs of education were the primary barrier for many families. She worked tirelessly to secure funding, partnering with international organizations, local businesses, and even alumni who had once benefited from education themselves. As she stood before the National Assembly to present her plan, she remembered the whispers of her classmates all those years ago. She recalled the doubt in their eyes when she raised her hand, the sneers when she spoke out in class. But now, those same critics were forced to listen. They were forced to acknowledge her vision, her strength, and her determination. The National Reform Initiative, known as Aminata's Education Revolution, was met with a mixture of praise and resistance. Some old politicians mocked her, calling her too idealistic. But Aminata was unshaken. She knew that the road ahead would be long, but she was ready to lead. Her efforts brought the people together in ways that had never been seen before. Families, teachers, and students rallied behind her, demanding change. In the end, Aminata succeeded. The education system was overhauled, classrooms were renovated, and children in remote villages finally had the opportunity to go to school without fear of fees or favoritism. The nation began to see results. Test scores rose, graduation rates improved, and, most importantly, hope returned to the people. But Aminata never forgot where she came from. Every year, she took time to visit rural schools, always remembering the faces of the children who had inspired her journey. They reminded her of the mission that had started all those years ago in a dusty classroom, with no shoes and no voice. The girl who once sat in the back of the class, ignored and overlooked, was now the woman who stood in front of the nation, leading with grace, wisdom, and an unshakable belief in the power of education. Aminata's story is one of resilience, transformation, and the power of belief in oneself. From the streets of her village to becoming the Minister of Education, her journey proves that no obstacle is too great when you have a vision. Now, she leads a nation towards a brighter future, showing that education is the key to change. Let Aminata's journey inspire you. No matter where you start, you can make a difference. If you believe in the power of education and transformation, like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Thank you for watching.